think it's been about 2 weeks since I've talked about Doctor Who. I think it's too long. So I can't stop myself. I am on a roll with doing lists related to Doctor Who, and this one was actually suggested in some of the comments by a couple of different people. I'm going to rank the series of new Doctor Who, breaking them all down, ranking them, starting with the worst, going up to the best. I'll try and keep the preamble short, but honestly, this was really, really hard. And it was something I'd never really done because I feel I need to be real emphatic about this at the start. I don't believe there is a bad series of Doctor Who. Even the ones that I put at the very bottom, I still liked. I am not one of those fans who goes, that year was crap. I've never had that experience with Doctor Who. I've had specific episodes I didn't like, but I've never had a series as a whole where I was like, what a waste of my time. One last thing I do have to mention, even though there's been 10 series, I've actually got 11 entries because I'm counting the specials as their own separate thing, which I'm effectively counting as a series. So that is enough preamble. Starting at the bottom, Series 7. And I don't want to say I was shocked, but I was a little surprised because, I see in a lot of forums and a lot of other videos, people love to crap all over Series 7. And until I sat down to do this ranking, I had a hard time figuring out why, because I enjoyed it for the most part until I really had to compare it to the other ones. Now, Series 7 was the one where they broke up the series halfway through. First of all, that structure does the series no favors. It means it feels like two small series rather than one big one. It doesn't have much structure in any larger sense. And then for me, part of the other problem is the addition of Clara. Now, Clara did grow on me eventually, but she started out in a rough place because when she first shows up, she's not a character. She's a mystery box. She's a plot point. She doesn't do any, I was way more interested in the future iteration of her we saw in Asylum of the Daleks and the Victorian iteration we saw of her in the Snowmen than I was with the version we actually got. But even if I look at the front half, which is the one with Amy and Rory, which I think is better overall than the back half of this thing, there's still some not great stuff in this. I think ultimately the capper was that I kind of struggled to figure out the standout episode of this series. I guess it would either be Asylum of the Daleks or Name of the Doctor, but that's the first and last episode of the series. That means that there's a whole lot of white noise in the middle of this thing. A couple of high points, there's some ones I still like in there, but those are the only two that I'm like, yeah, those are real good episodes, and that's not a great batting average for this thing. So that occupies the bottom spot. Moving up to space number 10, that will bring us to Series 2, which also surprised me a little bit. It's funny, I've actually had people comment mainly on my worst episodes list that, I must hate Series 2. And in my head, I don't. Actually, honestly, some of my favorite episodes are in Series 2. But it's also got a lot of clunkers. For every Satan Pit and Impossible Planet and Doomsday, we get stuff like New Earth and Love and Monsters and Fear Her, or The Idiot's Lantern. There's still some saving graces. There's School Reunion, which is good. There's Girl in the Fireplace, which is great. And there's some of the others I already mentioned. But even though it's got a better batting average than Series 7 does, which is why it's placed higher, when Series 2 missed, it missed hard. Moving up another spot, Series 3. I think this is probably the first one I'm going to have on here that I'm going to get some serious pushback on from some fans because, well, look, aside from there being some phenomenal episodes in this series, Blink and The Family of Blood, Human Nature, poor. But then there's Daleks in Manhattan, which is painful. There's the Shakespeare Code in 42, which are just kind of bland. And then if I'm looking at the series as a whole, there's two other big things. I don't love this take on the Master. And I've talked about this before, so I won't dwell on it too much. I like John Sims' later performances as the Master. I liked him better when he was in The End of Time. I liked him better when he showed up at the end of Series 10. His initial intro here in Series 3, I didn't love. And then there's the other thing, which is Martha. And I know I'm going to get pushed back on this as well, but I don't love Martha. But I really stress, I want to clarify, that has much more to do with character use and the way the show kind of treated her as a character than it does the performance or the actual characterization. Because I actually think Martha's a very good character. She's a strong character, and I think she's a character who deserved better than the show treated her. I feel like the show almost intentionally stacked the deck against Martha. It kept over and over and over comparing her to Rose and like deliberately trying to make it an unfavorable comparison and really emphasizing how hung up the doctor still was on Rose. And it just turned Martha into a rebound when she's better than that. So I didn't like how she was handled in this series overall. The Master wasn't doing it for me at this point. And so between those two factors, which are major ones when you're looking at the series as a whole, yeah, this is on the lower end. Moving up to the 8th spot, appropriately enough, is Series 8, which was Peter Capaldi's first series. And I did like Peter Capaldi pretty much out the gate. But I didn't love him yet. Not in this series. He would take a little while to grow on me. There's that. He wasn't quite fully connecting with me. We're still toting Clara around, and while she started, her chemistry's better with Capaldi than it was when she was with Matt Smith, but she's only just starting to work for me as a character in this one. And I think part of the thing with Series 8 is it's a series that I enjoyed when it first aired. It's one that probably took the biggest hit when I revisited it. When I realized, like, some of the episodes that I thought were great, like Listen, I actually have a fair number of issues with when I rewatched it again. And really the only episode that I'm like, yes, is Mummy on the Orient Express. There are still some other good ones. Flatline is good. I like Robots of Sherwood. I think Death in Heaven and the finisher is pretty strong, but overall it was not the strongest debut that they could have given Capaldi. Not terrible by any means, but yeah, just kind of middling. Moving up to the 7th spot, we stick with Peter Capaldi and we get Series 9. Now, Series 9, I like Capaldi much better. Now, I know some people found the whole guitar playing and the Sonic sunglasses and everything really cringy. I kind of like it. I kind of love it, actually. It's this aging rock star vibe, and I think he's really good for that. Overall, I do think this is a pretty strong series. There's only 2 fall down episodes, and I'm going to come back to them because they are the primary reason this series isn't higher as a whole. But by this point, Clara and the Doctor are actually really working for me. They're gelling very well. They've made Clara a proper character, and I found it interesting. The whole, she was like trying to be him, and the Doctor was like, don't try and be me. That's a bad idea. And that actually leads to her death in Face the Raven, which was good. And this series had Heaven Sent. Oh my God, that episode. And that one is one I was so happy to revisit and realize, no, it's still just as good as I remember it. Thank you. But then we've got the fall downs. First, there's Sleep No More, which just, yeah, it made my worst episodes list. But then there's Hellbent. Now, my opinion, the exact nature of my opinion on Hellbent has wavered over time. It's gone up and down. Initially, I was just befuddled and confused by this, and I didn't know what to make of it. Then I kind of, through the help of commenters, I kind of understood what it was doing better. So I couldn't say it failed at what it was doing, but I still didn't like it. And now, as more time has passed, I've actually come to really dislike it. Again, a lot of it having to do with its intent as well as its execution. And that episode alone, honestly, really drags this series down. Partly because it's the finale and partly because it impacts and what happens in this impacts so many other things that I can't just deal with it as an isolated, oh, that was just one bad episode, like I can with other clunkers in other series. There's too much tied up in that one. Moving up to the 6th place spot, we have the David Tennant specials. So in case you don't remember, that means The Next Doctor, The Dead Planet, The Waters of Mars, and The End of Time Parts 1 and 2. Now, I don't think that there is a complete junk episode out of this lot. I think probably the weakest one is Planet of the Dead or Dead Planet or what. Honestly, I can't even. I'm having a hard time remembering what the title was, which I think shows the fallout of that one. It's fine. It's functional. There's nothing really wrong with it, but it's pretty generic. It's not particularly memorable. I actually have a really soft spot for The Next Doctor. I really find it sweet and endearing, and there's a lot of aspects I like about that episode. With Waters of Mars, I know I have downplayed that episode before because a lot of people have a lot stronger love for that episode than I do, but it is still very good, even if I don't put it on the same pedestal other people do. And The End of Time seems to be surprisingly divisive. I think a lot of people are down on how drawn out the endings and the goodbyes are, and I get that, but kind of like with the end of Return of the King, for me, for the journey we've been through, I thought it felt earned. And we get what, for me, was an iteration of the Master that I liked a lot better than he was the first time. We get the Return of the Time Lords and Timothy Dalton. We get Wilf. I love Wilf. And overall, I think this is just a strong set of episodes. I'm not sure anything is quite truly stellar. I mean, if I were to pick a favorite out of this lot, it would be The End of Time, but I still recognize there are some sort of structural issues with The End of Time, and I understand why other people have problems with it. I just still enjoy it. But that gets it, basically dead center of this list. So we can get into what I can safely call the upper half, which brings us to number 5, Series 1. This one, I actually didn't think was going to make it this high because it's probably almost a 50-50 split between episodes I like and episodes I don't. But first off, we've got Dalek and we've got The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, which those two stories, those are some of my favorite Doctor Who ever. I adore those stories. And honestly, maybe it gets bumped up artificially because of this, but this was Christopher Eccleston's only series. And even in the episodes I don't love, I really like him as the Doctor. I like number 9. I like him a lot. And I wish we could have gotten more time with him. And, maybe I'm boosting the series placement overall because of him more than the strength of the series as a whole. But even if that's the case, so be it. In 4th place, we have Series 6, which is another series that I hear a lot of people have issues with that I can't say that they're wrong, I just don't share them. First of all, I really like Amy and Rory, and I think this stretch of episodes is where the dynamic of the two of them with the Doctor and that trio was really firing on all cylinders. I like River's song. I like her use in this. I like the reveals we get about her. I like the Impossible Astronaut. I like A Good Man Goes to War. I love the Doctor's wife. I really like the God Complex. I feel like overall this is the series where Matt Smith and these companions were at their most comfortable. They were their most fun. They were their most energetic. Plus, the series was the introduction to the Silence, and I know this is blasphemy in some circles, but I like the Silence better than the Weeping Angels. I mean, that's just me personally because, the idea that they mess with your head and you can't remember, that just hits my buttons a little harder than living statues, but they just work better for me. We are getting right up there. Top 3 spots now. Number 3, Series 5, Matt Smith's first series. Now, even though I said before, I think Series 6, the overall team dynamic between Amy, Rory, and the Doctor was working best then. I think actual overall writing and the episodes themselves are stronger in Series 5. And now I had a hard time figuring out which of those was going to come out on top of the other. And if I did this list again, maybe I'd switch them around. But this is where they're landing for right now. And I've said before, the 11th Hour was a phenomenal opening and intro to not only Matt Smith's Doctor, but also Amy and how their dynamic was going to work. I think the series has one of the better mystery box story mysteries over the course of the series overall. It's got the Return of the Weeping Angels. It's got the Doctor and Vincent, which is an episode that I've really come to appreciate as time has gone on. This was just a heck of a starter for Matt Smith, and it's right up there. Getting up to top 2, and if you've been keeping track and doing your math, you realize what the last 2 are going to be, and that does mean that the number 2 spot surprised me. I was not expecting this one to land this high. I really wasn't, but when I looked at things overall, I'm like, yeah, number 2. Series 10, the most recent series that finished airing. First of all, this is Capaldi at his best, so far as I'm concerned. I think he got better every single series that he was on, and by the time he finished, I absolutely loved him. I love Bill. I was so sure, based on some of the pre-release material that they put out, that I was gonna hate Bill. I loved her. I loved Nardole. I loved Missy. So for me, this series has possibly the best sort of series-long elements ever, and then it comes down to having some really good individual episodes on top of that. We've got Oxygen, we've got Extremists, we've got World Enough and Time. Whoa! And to my way of thinking, no real clunker episodes. I think probably the weakest was Empress of Mars, but even that was fine. This was just a really good, solid series, and it made me all the more sad that Capaldi was leaving, because this, man, it just kept getting better, and I wish I could have seen what we would have gotten with one more series. But that does mean we are at the #1 spot, in my opinion, the best series of Doctor Who, Series 4. First off, let's be upfront. Donna's my favorite companion, by a pretty decent margin, and I've said that before and I'll reiterate it now, and that goes a long way towards really lifting the series up as a whole. I think I've realized as I've ordered the series that the overall elements that stretch across the whole series are more likely to buoy a series over a couple of wonky episodes than a few stellar episodes are to buoy a series that otherwise just has a lot of elements that aren't working for me. I think Donna's a good example of that. I think this is one of the better mystery boxes, with the appearances of Rose and not knowing how that's working, as we find out as we go along. But then if we want to get down into individual episodes on top of that, Midnight, Silence in the Library, we got the return of Davros. Sontarans, the Ood, Fires of Pompeii, which, to be fair, was lent additional poignancy by Capaldi's coming back as the Doctor, but just this, oh man, this is a great series. And no, I'm not saying it's perfect. There are a couple of ones that I'm not a big fan of in here. I don't really think The Doctor's Daughter works. It really needed to be a two-parter. I've got issues with certain elements of Unicorn the Wasp that don't quite work for me. Partners in Crime is good, not great, but when I'm looking at series overall, the big picture, for me it's Series 4. But like I said, these were all good series of television, as far as I'm concerned. But that's my own personal ranking. Assuming you've made it to the end and didn't switch off because I gave a low ranking to your favorite series, what are your thoughts on this list? How would you order it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, as I am contractually obligated to remind you to do. Check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.